Hey guys, welcome back, Fast Monty's Garage. This is episode 2 of our fuel injection conversion. If you missed episode 1, go check it out there. I discuss why I'm going fuel injection and why I pick FiTech. So I promised in that video we were going to discuss fuel delivery options today and some of the installation procedure. So those of you that are converting, the biggest challenge is changing the way fuel is delivered to your throttle body. It has to be under high pressure. Carburetors take around 5 psi, fuel injection needs around 60, 58 psi to be exact for this one. So that gives us 3 options. One, you can get a new fuel tank with an in-tank pump. That's going to cost money. FiTech sells an in-tank pump, but the tank needs to be baffled and preferably a dual pickup, so one in each corner. So when you're doing some hard cornering, you're not going to ingest air, because if you ingest air into an inline pump or an in-tank pump, the engine will die because you have an air bubble in there. So that's option 2, is an inline pump, which would be outside of the gas tank, but it has to be mounted lower than the gas tank. It has to be gravity fed, so there just needs to be a nipple on the tank on the bottom. So you have to modify your tank or buy a specialized tank. Again, baffled so you don't get air into the pump. Option 3, we can use our stock tank, and that's what I'm going to be doing. Option 3 is what's called force fuel, and this is from FiTech as well. It has a gauge on it, you can make sure it's working. This is typically mounted in your engine compartment. So those of you guys that have been dying to get your battery mounted in the trunk, now's your opportunity. And you can mount this in its place. You can actually mount it on its side as well. Once you mount it in the engine compartment, your mechanical fuel pump can fill this up. There's a reservoir in it. There's a submerged high pressure pump in this unit. So if the pump should die, it's just 6 screws, you can change the pump. There's also a return line. So any of the 3 systems we talked about, you have to have a return line, because the constant pressure, there's going to be overflow. That overflow comes back to the tank. In this situation, for a forced fuel unit, the return line comes from here, not the throttle body. And in my situation, which I'm going to show you, I'm going to walk you through installing it for me, is I'm going to mount this in the trunk. So I'm going to have an electric fuel pump, carburetor electric fuel pump, filling this up, and then one high pressure line from here to the throttle body. The return line goes from here to the tank. I don't need to run a return line all the way to the front of the car. So that's cool. My battery's already in the tank, so I already have power there. So we're going to go through that whole installation procedure today. So let's get going. Let me show you what comes with this kit, and we'll go to the next step. All right, team, this is what comes with the kit. Besides the force fuel unit, several AN fittings with push to connect hose, a 10 micron filter with the appropriate fitting on the end for the hose, some ring terminals for our wiring, some hose clamps, and this really cool looking thing. This is actually, if you don't have a return line on your existing tank, we can use this. I happen to have a return line, but I'm still going to show you how to use this and how to install it. The most important thing that comes with this kit, yeah, you guessed it, instructions. So make sure you guys read this several times before you start throwing things in the car. Our whole goal here is to get everything installed where we want it, including the throttle body, any filters you're using, and then we do our plumbing. So there's going to be a separate video where I'm going to go through how to install AN hose. FiTech actually has their own AN fittings and hose, stainless steel braided hose. So I'm going to go through that as well. So let's go ahead and get started and figure out where we're going to place this thing. Hey guys, before we jump into the car and start mounting this stuff, I wanted to show you what accessories I bought to do my unique situation, and this might give you some ideas. So I went with a Holley Mighty Mite electric pump to supply fuel to that. I also got a fuel pump relay. Now, relay allows me to run really low gauge wiring to like a center console switch to operate these, while these are running off of high amp, like 30 amp. Now, I think this is 12 gauge wire to supply power to this unit. It doesn't have to go through that little switch. I'll talk more about that later. Some bulkhead fittings because I want to go through the trunk floor. You can also cut a hole and put grommets in if you want, but I prefer this method because there's no risk of accidentally cutting that hose when you're driving. And then I got some clamps to mount the filter. So I'll go ahead and put all these part numbers below. Don't freak out, but let's get in the car, pick some locations. Here is my junk in the trunk. So I have this 10-inch sub, which I barely use, an amp attached to it. My battery is in the trunk, you can see right there. This is actually removable, so when I want to autocross, that's what that tooling holder is for. I can just take this out. So we need to figure out where to put these things. We can literally put it anywhere, but I want to mount it sideways to keep center of gravity low. I don't want it to accidentally jar loose because it'll be more stable. Let's check this out. I love the engineering behind this thing. This plate comes off with these 4 screws, and you can mount it here. So you can mount this flat. Voila! Just like that. So now we can mount it flat. I love it. Here's plan A right here. And here's my little pump over here. Before I start bolting anything down, I'm going to go ahead and get under the car and think about possible plumbing for those bulkheads, those AN fitting bulkheads. I want to put them as close to the gas tanks. The gas tank's right under here. I don't want to go too high because, yes, we could mount them up on top of that back shelf, but again, I'd much rather be closer to the fuel tank than further away as far as elevation goes. So this is my plan A. I'm going to go into the car and look at possibilities for coming through the bulkhead. I do have some room behind the speaker to that front edge of the step. So that's what I'm thinking about plumbing back in there. We will see. All right, guys, plan A and a half. I think I want the bulkheads to come through this top differential hump because there's a ton of space in between here in the differential, and then the fuel supply on my tank is slightly off center, so it's over here, and they come out the top, so that'd be easy access to the bulkheads, and then we can come over here and back for the fuel return. So I'm thinking the pump here, because it'll come straight shot over here and then over to our other pump. So having said that, what I'm going to do is I just put some tape down, and I put some tape on the bracket, and I'm going to mark the bracket and the tape. I'll take the bracket off of the pump, put the bracket back down, then we can really figure out where to put our holes. All right, just like that. So bracket down, now you can really find your holes, get a center punch, etc. But first I have to find bolts that fit those slots and go from there. I found some fasteners. They're actually leftover parts when I rebuilt the GTO. I mean, gosh, who doesn't have leftover parts? Anyway, I'm going to start drilling here, but I think this goes without saying. Make sure you're conscious of where your gas tank is. My gas tank comes to right there, so I'm not worried about drilling these holes. These holes, I'm going to be very careful about how deep I go. Once I get the hole drill, I'll be able to get a flashlight in there and see exactly how much depth I have to the gas tank. So if based on that math, we can shim these with washers if we need to. All right, that's the plan. All right, guys, I got my holes drilled, and if you want to check your depth to your fuel tank, take a smaller drill bit. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but I can hear the tank, and then you just keep your finger on it, and that's our depth. So we take our fastener, and we compare the two. Plenty, because we still have the thickness of the plate to go through, so we don't have to worry about it. And we check the other side. Same thing. So we're good to go. I can go ahead and mount it up. All right, nice and installed. And on the back, I've been thinking about it. I think I am going to put the electric pump right here and run the connection through this step. But I'm not going to do that until we get to the plumbing section. So let's get to wiring. All right, guys, before we start actually wiring the force fuel, I want to point something out. In your EFI kit is a wire harness for power. So the red wire powers the EFI unit. The orange wire powers your pump. And this is a safety feature. If your engine should cut out and this registers no RPM, it actually turns your fuel pump off. For safety reasons, that's actually a pretty good idea. For power reasons, I'm still going to run a relay because, as you guys know, there's a battery in my trunk. So I want power to come directly from the battery, and that saves some load on the EFI system too. So I will do this wiring for the actual relay when we install the full system, but today I'm going to install the relay and show you how it works just with the voltmeter, and we'll prove the theory and everything else. So let's go to the next step. All right, here's the right side of the trunk. This is where I put the relay, and I have circuit breakers already over here. This is for my amps. I have 2 going in here, and I actually had an empty bay. So this red 10 gauge goes to the relay. Then the purple one is going to go to the force fuel system. The red and gray, I'm sorry, red, that's not red, that's yellow. Yellow and gray is to complete the other circuit, which turns on the relay. And I'll show how that works in a second here. All right, if you're new to wiring, etc., the kit comes with these 2 boots, which is awesome. What you do is after you strip your wire, you basically screw it on like that. Go all the way to the end, and then you can pop it out. Now once you're here, you have a couple options. You can easily put this on and crimp it, but because this comes with boot connectors, little covers, I am going to solder these. So I'm going to break the blue plastic off, and I'm going to solder them on, and then we can put our cover back over it. So that protects it. Just like that. Just so you guys know I wasn't blowing smoke. So soldered, and then we can put our rubber boot over it after we put it on the terminal. I'm going to show you how this works. When you get this wired up and ready, do not connect this to the positive until we're done with the entire installation. We'll cover that in a later video. I wanted to show you how this relay works. So back there is my existing electric pump on-off switch. So it's on, the ignition is switched to on, and then I have this gray wire leading from it, and this is our yellow wire to the relay, and I have my voltmeter set up, so positive and negative. It's clearly showing no voltage. When we connect the relay, we have 12, and you might be able to hear it click. If you can hear that click or not. So we're good. So I just have to wait until we're done wiring to figure out where to put this yellow wire. This yellow wire that goes to my relay is going to go to the orange wire from the throttle body. Okay, point of clarification for you. The reason we don't have that positive terminal attached is we don't want to accidentally fire up the high pressure pump with no fuel in the reservoir. So when we come to first fire, I'm going to run my electric pump first to fill up the reservoir, attach the wire, crank the engine, say 10 seconds at a time, so the system will be sensing RPM, and turn the pump on. We're going to do that 2 or 3 times, and then we'll be ready to do a first fire. If you have a mechanical pump, same thing. We're not going to connect the wire until we've cycled the engine, the mechanical pump, 3 or 4 times to fill up the reservoir. Then you attach the wire, then you do the first fire. And don't worry, I'm going to remind you when we actually do our first fire, which I can't wait for. It seems like it's a mile away. And you're probably wondering, Mike, what about that funky attachment? When do we get to put that in? Well, we ran out of time this episode. So next episode, we're going to do what I have to do to the fuel tank and what you probably have to do to your fuel tank, and we'll go through those options. So until then, you guys know the drill. Build them fast, drive them faster. See ya.